On a crisp September morning in 2022, a sanitation worker on Manhattan's Upper East Side discovered something that would paralyze the city's elite financial circle. Inside a black leather suitcase left near a dumpster behind East 72nd Street, police found the dismembered remains of 29-year-old Leah Monroe, a junior analyst at one of the city's most aggressive hedge funds, Ellison Capital. The discovery wasn't just gruesome. It was calculated. Each body part had been wrapped in vacuum-sealed plastic, labeled with Post-it notes marked by timestamps. Whoever did this wasn't just trying to dispose of a body. They were making a point. The suitcase was traced to a boutique luggage brand, used primarily by high-earning professionals. Nearby surveillance footage led investigators to a luxury vehicle parked outside a private garage just 2 blocks away. The plates belonged to a man worth over $200 million, CEO and founder of Ellison Capital, 46-year-old Charles Ellison. At first glance, Ellison was untouchable. A Wall Street power broker, keynote speaker at Ivy League conferences, and the face of several philanthropic foundations. But beneath that polished exterior was an unspoken truth. The growing whispers among employees of his increasingly erratic behavior, his fixation with one particular analyst, and an internal scandal that had never reached the press. Now, those whispers were echoing in homicide interrogation rooms. As detectives began to unravel the story behind Leah Monroe's death, they uncovered a series of calculated decisions, missed warnings, and an obsession that had slowly boiled over into violence, ending with one of the most shocking and meticulously staged crimes in the history of New York's financial world. Ellison Capital operated out of a high-rise glass tower overlooking Bryant Park, a sleek, state-of-the-art fortress where fortunes were made and careers destroyed in the blink of a trade. Founded in 2010 by Charles Ellison, the firm grew rapidly through aggressive short-selling tactics and high-frequency trading, raking in billions, gaining notoriety, and attracting top-tier talent. Charles Ellison was the engine behind it all. Born in Greenwich, Connecticut, and educated at Wharton, he was known as a brilliant but ruthless strategist with an iron grip on his firm and staff. He was unmarried, intensely private, and rarely seen outside professional events. Within Ellison Capital, his word was law. Leah Monroe joined the firm in 2019, fresh from Stanford, with a background in econometrics and behavioral finance. Ambitious, discreet, and with a reputation for precision, she quickly became one of the most promising junior analysts at the company. Colleagues described her as quiet, disciplined, and meticulous in her work, but unusually reserved in personal matters. The two rarely crossed paths in the open, but internally there were signs. Unexplained meetings, late-night emails, performance reviews conducted personally by Ellison. Nothing overt, nothing reportable, but enough to raise eyebrows among the observant. Behind polished office glass, a silent storm was gathering. On the evening of September 12, 2022, Leah Monroe was seen exiting Ellison Capital at exactly 7:42 p.m., captured by a lobby security camera. She was dressed in a navy trench coat, carrying her work tote, and appeared composed, normal. No one saw her again alive after that moment. Her keycard had been used one final time at 8:06 p.m. to access the executive elevator to the 42nd floor, the firm's restricted area. That floor housed Charles Ellison's private office, which had its own biometric locking system. There were no other employees in the building at that hour, no maintenance staff, no custodial crews. She never left the building, according to the surveillance review. Yet there was no footage of a struggle, no alarm triggered, no panicked call. The following morning, Leah failed to show up for work. Her supervisor logged her absence as unplanned and uncommunicated. Uncharacteristic, but not immediately alarming. By noon, her phone went straight to voicemail. By 3:00 p.m., her family had filed a missing person report. Meanwhile, building maintenance was called to investigate a plumbing, Issue in a locked executive restroom on the 42nd floor. Inside, they discovered traces of what appeared to be bleach around the sink, and a single long strand of dark hair partially melted into the drain. A plastic glove was lodged deep in the piping. Still, without a body, no alarm was raised. 2 days. Later, a mid-level manager at Ellison Capital received an anonymous package at his home address. Inside were 2 items: a sealed USB drive and a photo printout. The USB contained a single file, an exported email draft from Charles Ellison's account. The message was never sent, but it was addressed to Leah. The tone was erratic and deeply personal. It hinted at feelings, frustration, betrayal. Attached to the draft was a surveillance still image, grainy but clear enough to identify Leah entering the 42nd floor at 8:06 p.m. The recipient turned the drive over to police. That triggered a warrant. When investigators entered Ellison's personal office and adjoining suite, they found the biometric reader had been disabled manually. Inside, the floor had been professionally cleaned. Too clean. Even the air ducts had been vacuumed. But luminol tests revealed faint traces of blood splatter beneath the seams of the carpet and on the baseboards along the far wall. Still no body, no weapon, no confession, no direct witness. 3 days after that, on September 17th, the suitcase containing Leah's remains appeared near a dumpster 2 blocks from Ellison's penthouse. The placement wasn't random. It was positioned in a visible alley often used by waste crews, meant to be found. Police secured the crime scene immediately. Inside the suitcase were 4 vacuum-sealed bags, each containing a portion of Leah's dismembered body. Every bag was labeled with a handwritten timestamp using an Ellison Capital sticky notepad, identical to those found in Charles's office. One of them included a partial fingerprint. It matched Charles Ellison. Authorities moved fast. Ellison was taken into custody at a private helipad on the west side as he prepared to board a chartered flight with no listed destination. At the time of arrest, he was calm, composed, and unarmed. His phone had been wiped clean. 2 burner phones were recovered from his vehicle. The trunk contained 2 more suitcases, empty but identical to the one found near the dumpster. Despite mounting evidence, Ellison denied all involvement. He claimed Leah had resigned, that she had become mentally unstable, and that her disappearance was unrelated to him. His legal team immediately filed for pre-trial release, citing lack of direct eyewitnesses and the circumstantial nature of the forensic evidence. But the timeline was tightening. Investigators began reconstructing Leah's last known movements, tracing call logs, keycard data, internal computer access points, and Ellison's meticulously guarded calendar. The more they searched, the more threads began to unravel. Behind the closed doors of a hedge fund empire, a fatal obsession had turned deadly, and the cold logic of power, secrecy, and precision had left its trail. The NYPD Major Crimes Unit assigned Detective Laura Kendrick to lead the investigation. A 16-year veteran with a reputation for precision and persistence, Kendrick approached the case methodically. Her first priority was timeline reconstruction. What happened between Leah Monroe's final keycard swipe at 8:06 p.m. and the discovery of her remains 5 days later. Initial forensic analysis of the suitcase revealed no DNA other than Leah's and the partial print tied to Ellison. The plastic wrapping material matched industrial-grade shrink wrap used in food services and office shipping, commonly available, not traceable. But the timestamp notes were a breakthrough. Lab testing showed they were written with a fine-point black marker found in Ellison's private desk. The notes included a chilling detail. Each one indicated a different time: 8:24 p.m., 9:13 p.m., 10:01 p.m., and 12:18 a.m. It was later confirmed that these corresponded with disabled security checkpoints on the executive floor, manually overridden from a hidden panel in the server closet, accessible only by master admin credentials. Detectives examined Ellison's activity on the internal network. Logs showed unauthorized access to the security control system between 7:50 p.m. and 1:80 a.m. The credentials used belonged to the building's head of operations, who, when questioned, claimed his access card had gone missing a week prior. Leah's phone and work laptop were never found, but her personal laptop, retrieved from her apartment, provided another lead. On it, investigators found a file folder labeled Meetings Private, containing screenshots of multiple calendar invites from Ellison. These were never logged into the firm's central scheduling system. They were manually sent from Ellison's private email account to her personal inbox and were titled cryptically, Review Q3, Discussion 1-on-1, Private Analysis. Each was scheduled after 8 p.m. and always on Thursdays, when the building was nearly empty. Digital forensics traced Ellison's internet history in the weeks leading to the murder. On an encrypted browser, he had visited dozens of sites related to body decomposition, chemical cleanup, and legal loopholes for missing persons cases. He had also downloaded a PDF titled Evidence Erasure, Corporate and Legal Strategies, written under a pseudonym but hosted on a secured server traced to one of Ellison Capital's shell subsidiaries. Detective Kendrick ordered a second search of Ellison's private office, this time bringing in a forensic anthropologist and a scent detection dog. Behind a removable wooden panel in the ceiling, the team uncovered a heavy-duty trash bag containing women's clothing soaked in bleach, a bloodied pair of latex gloves, and a torn Ellison Capital ID badge. The ID number matched Leah Monroe's profile. Security footage review resumed. While no exit was recorded for Leah, the freight elevator had a brief disruption window between 1:15 and 1:22 a.m. Its camera had a 5-minute blackout due to a scheduled maintenance patch pushed remotely through the building's system. Logs showed the patch was initiated from Ellison's administrative laptop. The forensic team then matched tiny strands of industrial carpet fiber found in the suitcase with a strip of specialized carpeting used only in the firm's executive conference room, suggesting the crime may have occurred not in the restroom, but in the main boardroom. Interviews with staff painted a troubling picture. While most described Ellison as controlled and distant, a few admitted they'd noticed his focus on Leah. He had overridden a promotion cycle to fast-track her bonus package. He had asked her to accompany him to 2 private conferences under the guise of mentorship, both of which she declined. An anonymous HR complaint had been filed 6 months earlier citing uncomfortable encounters and pressure from a senior executive, but the document was redacted, and the case was dismissed with no further review. Detective Kendrick also uncovered a series of Venmo payments from Ellison's personal account to a private security contractor, $5,000 dispersed in multiple transactions over the summer. The contractor, when subpoenaed, admitted to conducting background checks and discreet tailing of a female employee at Ellison's request. He claimed he had no idea what the true purpose was. A deeper dive into Leah's last 3 months revealed signs of fear. She had ordered a home security camera, canceled multiple evening engagements, and changed her jogging route. She had even drafted an email to HR titled Safety Concern, but it was never sent. The final breakthrough came from traffic camera footage 2 nights before the body was discovered. At 2:38 a.m., a black SUV matching Ellison's was caught, parked in a no-standing zone behind a midtown recycling facility. The timestamp matched the time frame during which detectives believed the body was transported. Ellison's GPS logs had been deleted, but his EasyPass account registered an exit from the FDR drive 10 minutes before. When confronted with the mounting forensic and digital evidence, Ellison maintained his denial, calling the investigation a coordinated takedown. He hired a high-profile legal defense team specializing in white-collar cases and invoked executive privilege in court filings, attempting to suppress internal communications seized during the search. Still, the pieces were falling into place. Detective Kendrick compiled a 142-page case summary that included forensic timelines, digital breadcrumbs, altered surveillance logs, private financial transfers, and a precise reconstruction of Leah Monroe's final hours. The final report painted a picture not of spontaneous violence, but of a premeditated act carried out by a man who had used corporate resources, legal insulation, and meticulous planning to silence the woman who had rejected his control. By the time charges were formally filed, the case had become a media firestorm. The downfall of Charles Ellison, once considered an untouchable titan of finance, was now irreversible. Just as the prosecution prepared for trial, a twist emerged that threatened to shift the entire trajectory of the case. 4 weeks after Ellison's arrest, a package arrived at the NYPD's Midtown precinct. It had no return address, and inside was a black flash drive sealed in a transparent anti-static bag. Attached was a small note. "You're looking in the wrong direction." The contents of the flash drive included 5 files. 4 were security. Footage clips dated 2 months prior to Leah Monroe's disappearance. The 5th was a screen recording of a remote desktop session, showing a live feed of an internal Ellison Capital messaging app. The IP address was traced to a server registered in the Cayman Islands linked to one of the firm's offshore subsidiaries. The video clips showed Leah Monroe entering and exiting a townhouse in Soho on multiple occasions between June and July. More startlingly, she was not alone. Each time she was accompanied by another man, later identified as Roman Keller, a recently terminated IT systems contractor for Ellison Capital. Keller had been dismissed for unauthorized access to internal servers, but no charges were filed at the time. Detectives pulled Keller's file and re-examined the exit interview logs. Nothing flagged, but further inspection showed that Keller had submitted 3 internal reports about unusual monitoring software installed on select employee devices, particularly on Leah Monroe's laptop. His warnings were ignored, and his termination had occurred just 2 weeks later. Investigators brought Keller in for questioning. Under subpoena, Keller admitted to having been in a relationship with Leah Monroe, one they both kept secret. Due to internal policy and fear of retaliation, he claimed Leah had told him about Ellison's late-night meetings, cryptic emails, and increasingly personal behavior. According to Keller, Leah had begun recording conversations and collecting evidence in case she needed protection. He stated that the night she went missing, she had texted him a single phrase. He locked it from the inside. "I need to be calm." Keller said he tried to reach her repeatedly afterward. When she didn't respond, he panicked. Instead of going to the police, he hacked into Ellison's internal system, downloaded whatever data he could find, and created the flash drive. But he withheld it out of fear of being implicated due to his previous dismissal. The prosecution now had a new layer to their case, proof of stalking software planted on Leah's machine. The forensic team analyzed a copy of her work-issued laptop image, previously stored by the IT department. Hidden in the system logs was a covert monitoring application, capable of accessing microphone input, screen activity, and keystrokes. The application had been deployed by an admin user account traced back to Charles Ellison's device, installed manually 4 months before the murder. More damning still, logs revealed that Ellison had viewed over 100 hours of Leah's activity. Emails, video calls, even her remote desktop sessions, without her knowledge. He had intercepted 2 resignation letters Leah had drafted and deleted them before they could be submitted. But the most shocking discovery came from a previously overlooked financial transaction. 2 days before Leah's disappearance, Ellison had wired $75,000 to a private laboratory in Virginia that specialized in forensic chemical treatments. The purpose? A compound used for masking blood traces, commonly applied to porous surfaces like carpet or upholstery. The lab later admitted under oath that it had sent a discreet package to a Manhattan address registered under one of Ellison Capital's consulting entities. That address a secondary property owned by Ellison, listed as private corporate retreat, on firm documentation. Investigators had never searched the location. A team executed a warrant immediately. Inside, they found a soundproofed basement room, bare walls, one surveillance camera, and faint traces of bloodstains soaked deep into the concrete despite chemical attempts to erase them. A single silver earring matching the pair Leah was last seen wearing lay wedged between floorboards. Back at Ellison's penthouse, forensic specialists re-examined his personal safe using upgraded chemical detection tools. Hidden in the lining of a false compartment, they found a series of paper printouts, screen captures of Leah's social media accounts, calendar entries, and an 11-page document titled Personal Strategy Notes. The content was chillingly clinical. Observations of Leah's behavior, records of her meetings, predictions about her actions, and strategic notes about limiting exposure, regaining control, and ending risk. Despite Ellison's legal team attempting to block these findings on grounds of unlawful search extensions, the court ruled the evidence admissible, citing a clear pattern of obstruction, manipulation, and concealment. Public perception of the case shifted dramatically. What was once a case of workplace violence or obsession had evolved into something darker, a premeditated psychological operation orchestrated by a man with both the means and the mindset to monitor, control, and eliminate someone he perceived as a threat. It was no longer just a murder investigation. It was the exposure of a systematic abuse of power, where surveillance, manipulation, and digital intrusion had replaced fists and firearms, and where the weapon was information itself. The revelations shocked the business community. Ellison Capital collapsed within weeks, clients fleeing, partners distancing, and lawsuits piling up. Employees who once stayed silent began coming forward with stories of paranoia, restricted access, shredded documents, and a culture of fear that extended far beyond Leah Monroe. What began as whispers had now become testimony. As the trial approached, the prosecution's narrative had solidified. Leah Monroe didn't die in a crime of passion or sudden rage. She died as a result of a long-planned, technology-fueled campaign of obsession and control that ended in calculated execution. The trial of Charles Ellison began on April 3, 2023, in Manhattan Criminal Court under intense national scrutiny. The courtroom was packed with reporters, former colleagues, and members of the financial world who had once praised Ellison's brilliance. Now, they watched the fall of one of their own. Prosecutors charged Ellison with first-degree murder, unlawful, surveillance, obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, and stalking. The weight of the evidence was formidable: time-stamped surveillance footage, keycard records, blood traces, digital logs of remote monitoring, the chemical masking compound, purchase, and the hidden observation room in the private retreat property. Opening statements set the tone. The prosecution argued that Ellison had used his power, money, and control over a high-security environment to stage a silent murder without witnesses. They painted the crime as a calculated elimination of a perceived liability, not an act of passion. Ellison's defense team countered with claims of fabrication, framing, and circumstantial overreach. They insisted that someone within the company had planted the evidence to bring down Ellison, citing the anonymous USB drive, and Keller's involvement as suspicious. They labeled Keller a jilted insider seeking revenge, questioning his motives for withholding key information for weeks. But the digital footprint was not easy to dispute. Key testimony came from forensic analysts who demonstrated that the surveillance software used on Leah's computer was manually installed from Ellison's device and required physical access. The timestamp logs from the firm's internal servers were unaltered and corresponded precisely with the timeline of Leah's disappearance. Another blow to the defense came from the lab technician in Virginia who testified that Ellison had personally signed for the chemical delivery under a false company name, Video footage from the lab's security camera, recovered after a court order, clearly showed Ellison at the counter. The jury also heard from Detective Laura Kendrick, who laid out the case in sequence. Leah's final known movements, the manipulation of surveillance systems, Ellison's attempts to wipe digital records, and the discovery of the soundproof room. Her calm delivery and reliance on verifiable facts made an impact. One of the most haunting moments came when the prosecution displayed images of the strategy notes recovered from Ellison's safe. The room fell silent as the jury read phrases like "cut exposure at the source," "terminate unpredictability," and "post-removal sanitization," essential. In response, the defense attempted to suppress the document, arguing it was a fictional exercise or a hypothetical memo. The judge rejected the motion, stating the material, coupled with surrounding evidence, supported its relevance. Ellison never took the stand. His lawyers argued it was unnecessary, citing his Fifth Amendment rights. But to the public and the jury, his silence was interpreted as confirmation. After 6 weeks of arguments, testimony, and cross-examinations, the jury deliberated for just over 9 hours. On May 17, 2023, they returned their verdict. Guilty on all counts. Charles Ellison showed no visible reaction as the sentence was read. The judge ordered immediate remand and set a sentencing date for the following month. On June 21st, Ellison was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In his final statement to the court, the judge remarked, "This was not only the destruction of a promising young woman's life, but a systemic abuse of technological power and institutional privilege. It is a chilling reminder of how obsession, when combined with access and control, becomes lethal." The impact extended beyond the courtroom. Ellison Capital's board dissolved. Shareholders filed class action lawsuits. Regulatory bodies opened. Investigations into the company's security practices and internal oversight failures. Former employees, emboldened by the trial, began speaking publicly. Several admitted they had suspected misconduct but feared professional retaliation. Some disclosed similar private meeting patterns and excessive oversight, though none had escalated to the extent Leah endured. Leah Monroe's family released. A brief statement outside the courthouse. "Leah was more than an employee. She was our daughter, our sister, and someone who trusted the system to protect her. That trust was broken, but today we have some justice." For Detective Kendrick and the NYPD, the case became a benchmark, an example of how digital forensics, methodical persistence, and silent details could speak louder than eyewitnesses. The trial concluded, but its echoes reshaped policies in corporate, security, employee monitoring laws, and internal complaint protections across major firms. The verdict was final, but the questions it raised remained deeply unsettling. In the end, Charles Ellison's empire wasn't undone by a market crash or a financial scandal. It was unraveled by his own unchecked obsession. A man who built a fortune by predicting risk, failed to see the consequences of targeting the one person who refused to play by his rules. Leah Monroe wasn't a headline, a liability, or a threat. She was a 29-year-old professional who had every right to feel safe in her workplace. Her murder wasn't spontaneous. It was methodical, it was premeditated, and it was preventable. This case exposed a disturbing reality, that in the high towers of power and privilege, silence can be manufactured, surveillance can be weaponized, and evidence can be buried if no one's watching closely enough. But this time, someone did watch. A disgraced contractor, a determined detective, and a trail of digital footprints that couldn't be erased. The conviction of Charles Ellison served as a rare example of justice catching up with power, but it also left behind lasting questions. How many more stories like Leah's go unseen? How much surveillance is too much, and what protections truly exist when the predator controls the system? As the cameras left the courtroom and the headlines Faded, one truth remained. Leah Monroe's story wasn't just a crime, it was a warning, a reminder that obsession, when left unchecked by consequence, doesn't just blur the lines between interest and intrusion. It erases them completely. If the story unsettled you, share it, because sometimes the most dangerous crimes are the ones hidden in plain sight.